Special meeting of Washington, Missouri City Council, Monday, June 29th, 2020, 4:30 p.m. Heidrich.
Here.
Holtmeyer.
Here.
Obermark.
Here.
Patke.
Here.
Pettit.
Here.
Scornia.
Here.
Sullentrup.
Here.
Wessels. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Approval and adjustment of agenda. You have a blotter item, letter from the Emergency Management Director regarding COVID-19 CDC recommendations.
I just want to, I'll go ahead and start off. I just, so everybody knows, we've had, and certainly this kind of, the mayor had some calls, and we talked this weekend about maybe to go ahead and provide you with this letter, ask Mark to provide you with the letter. When we meet with other outside organizations that wish to use our facilities, we've looked to try to see, what's the attendance that they anticipate, for those events. Obviously, we know some of the events that the Chamber and downtown Washington, for example, that use our facilities. A lot of the times, if it's over an event that's been held in the past, for example, Music at the Market, for example, then we know kind of how many people we anticipate that will be there. But what we have, Mark provided one of the first times when we met with the Chamber to discuss with them when they were in the discussions about having the fair. The question kind of came up of like, well, what are the guidelines which we'd be looking towards? Mark provided us with CDC guidelines and said, based upon, it all depends on what the transmission rate is within your community, et cetera. So in talking about that, we also, this came up again with downtown Washington recently when they made the decision not to hold reschedule the Art Fair and Wine Fest. And a lot of it had to do with the amount of people that we anticipated that would go ahead and be there. The mayor, though, had some calls this weekend and asked me to go ahead and pass that on. She asked me to follow up on specifically one of them. I did. There was some issues. There were just some concerns with this event and all other events and how many people are attending. As the city have some type of restrictions, and it was brought up the fact that we hadn't even shared with you as a council what the recommendations are of what we've been using, especially when they use our facilities. Now, the event that's on your agenda tonight, that is not on city property. Obviously, that's on the Knights of Columbus. If you wanted to do something different for those types of events, then we're talking about a whole nother discussion. But at least for when we have events that they want to utilize our facilities, whether it's the fairgrounds, whether it's downtown, on the riverfront, et cetera, we use this as the guideline. So Mark, if you could come up and kind of walk them through that real quickly.
Before you do that, could I get a motion and a second to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Pettit, second by Heidrich. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Council. I emailed this to you rather late. You may not have even had a chance to check your emails, but CDC guidelines, and I highlighted out of their document considerations for postponing or canceling a mass gathering. And the point to which we've been moving is at minimal to moderate level of community transmission, it's recommended to cancel community-wide mass gatherings, for example, greater than 250 people. The cutoff threshold is at the discretion of community leadership based on the current circumstances the community is facing and the nature of events. So we're pretty obviously at that low to moderate rate of community spread. I mean, right now, I think there's 2 people positive within 63090. There's 38 active cases as of today in Franklin County. And we looked at that approximate 250 number, and as Darren alluded to, we looked at a lot of the events that are, held like down at the riverfront, like at the market, and Thursdays on the riverfront, Sunset on the riverfront. Those sort of events we felt pretty comfortable with because they're in that 250, 300, somewhere in that range of people that were there. So we really didn't have a problem with those size events, but we did have a problem when you get into large events like the fair, the Art and Wine Fest, where you're going to have large groups of people congregating. So that primarily is our concern, that that we would be encouraging people to congregate, and we certainly don't want the optics of what the Lake of the Ozarks had.
Now, with that in mind, we've had some events, and this is the reason why it's probably the timing is pretty good, because we still have some events that are scheduled to use our facilities or would like to use our facilities that will exceed this. And I think what we would like to do is just have that policy to where we make that judgment call of how many people that they plan on having before we go ahead and allow them to use our facilities. So I'll give you an example that's going to be a clear one, that's going to be an issue that I see that I know there was some discussion last Thursday night, Oxfest, that's supposed to be in September. That'll be on a Saturday. Certainly that's an event that gets more than 300 people there at that, and I anticipate that we'll probably have that. My concern is that's definitely going to exceed these guidelines that we've been utilizing all this time. So what we'd like to do is just at least look for some guidance from you as the council. This is what we feel we need to follow in order to do our jobs, but we wanted to make sure that the council felt the same way as well, or at least you had it for discussion, so that when people ask you about those facilities, if they want to use those. So.
And I did reach out today, tried to get a hold of one of the organizers of Oxfest, but I haven't made contact yet.
That's the only other one I can think of, other than if the fair has some other events that are not, Chamber talked about having some type of other different fair events out there on the fairgrounds, but we thoroughly went through these guidelines with them, and they understand where we're coming from on those. So.
Was last Thursday Sunset? I wasn't able to make it there. Do we have any idea how many people were there?
Oh, you were pushing 300 or more.
Usually is.
It was more than that.
More than
Yeah.
that.
And I was saying it was over 300.
Right. And that's, not on top of each other, but that's congregated pretty close together down there. That's something.
They did work with us. They talked with Mark and the city about spreading their stuff out with particularly their vendors. So, for example, not all the beer and alcohol and all those sales were all right there on that lot where they've been in the past. They moved the tents out on either side of the pavilion, et cetera, and that kind of spread out the crowd so they weren't all congregating in one spot, at least in tight conformity.
Can we do something like Ozfest, have them monitor their gate since they got to pay to get in? And
The one thing I would suggest is if they did an event like that, is that they only have a limited number of tickets. That could possibly be it.
there you go.
I think last year's Oxfest was around 800.
So,
I guess back to my point is it matters what the square footage. I mean, if you're at the stage out there, it can handle more than the people at the riverfront. I mean, I think that makes a big difference. If we just say 250 people somewhere, we're not being apples to apples, I guess.
Jeff, yeah, I guess a real good example of that was the Art and Wine Fest. When in discussing that, like the art part of it, I mean, that's spread out over several city blocks. That part, you don't have people congregating. But at the farmer's market, the parking lot and Main Street, that's where you have the large congestion of people, and how do you control that?
Right.
And that's always the issue with these sort of events, is we are social animals. And it's up to us as adults, and do our distancing and all that. If everybody behaved, this would be.
we also, and I will go ahead and state it. For the other events that we've seen, like the ones that happen during the week, whether it's music at the market or whether it's down on the riverfront, those are usually during the weekday. We don't really get a lot of outside or out of town people that come in for those events. Obviously, they're open and free, so anybody that wants to come to them, but typically you don't get that. On these other events, when you have them on the weekend, you are susceptible to probably have a lot more people from maybe other areas come in for those events. So that's another reason too.
Mark, how do you make a determination on what is a minimal or moderate level? Are there some standards for that?
No, not really, you know, but I think obviously I wouldn't even consider us at this point, you know, the moderate side. Obviously, I think we're on the low because we have let's say, two cases in 63090 that are active right now and 38 in Franklin County. I think out of those 20 some are active in the county, there's some in long-term care. There's like a dozen in long-term care and the rest are scattered throughout the county. So, you know, it's out there. So, you know, would I say we're heavily on the moderate to high side? Absolutely not. I would not say that at this point. But as anyone who's been watching the news and knows, the numbers are growing. You know, they're not going down, they're going up. So that's the point of concern. And
Are they testing more?
I'm sorry?
Are they testing more right now?
I'm not sure the testing's been over now, what, for 2 weeks. They haven't been doing any testing. Well, we had the community testing. The only testing that's going on that's potentially increased because of the procedures at doctor's offices and hospitals starting back up. They have some pre-procedural tests where they have to do that, but the positives on that has been minimal.
When Parsons did the restrictions lifted, that didn't include the CDC guidelines?
Yeah, did they look at that? And they may have looked at it, but I mean, when you look at you know, what Missouri did versus the CDC guidelines, they don't line up very well.
Well, I'm just understand him saying that all restrictions would be lifted, and in my opinion, the CDC guidelines would have been a restriction, which I think should be lifted anyway.
It should be lifted.
But if I could throw something in there, he made another statement after that in which he talked about people need to take responsibility and wear masks and distance and avoid crowds and things like that.
I agree 100%, and if a person doesn't feel safe on where they're at, they shouldn't go. But can you answer the question, were they lifted along with the rest of the restrictions?
No, I don't know that the CDC restrictions list. I don't know if the governor can lift CDC restrictions. They're recommendations.
The guidelines.
They're guidelines. Yeah. Yeah. They are not law.
So we don't need a decision tonight, I think, but we wanted to go ahead and at least make you aware of that as we've moved forward with entities that have wanted to use, especially city facilities, these are the guidelines that we've tried to go ahead and work with. And
I know that as far as these Oxfest, you know, if you say they had 800 people there last year, I know that we put 1,000 chairs in the VIP seating during the fair, which is only one small area by stage. I know you haven't spoke to them yet, right?
Nope, have not.
Maybe after you speak to them and they can come up with some kind of plan of how they can,
Might be able to do it.
but until then, I don't think we need to act on any of that.
we just wanted to bring it to your attention that these are the guidelines we've been working with for the last couple of events, and we just see some events coming down the horizon that are going to be probably exceed those numbers. Okay.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
I think we need to take it in consideration what's the city facilities, no doubt. But if it's a private spot, I mean, if a bar in town has overcrowded, we can't do nothing about that.
Other than you, unless you wanted to go back to the restrictions of what we had before back in April, that's the only thing that you could do.
Right.
But I don't know that that's necessary, at least at this point. But no, this would just be for city facilities
Right.
only.
We're not trying to reinvent
No,
private property.
we're not trying to tell the Elks how many people they can have for a wedding, or the Knights of
Exactly.
Columbus how many people they can have up on their, at their facilities, et cetera.
And this is just temporary, I'm hoping.
What's that?
The CDC guidelines
Yes.
on how many people you're allowed to have. I mean, obviously, if this COVID goes away, everything will be lifted then, Ben, or not?
If we get a vaccine, whatever, it goes out there, yeah, I would see the CDC guidelines being lifted, sure.
Okay.
The CDC guidelines are sort of like the food guidelines, you know, they're out there, they're not law, they're just recommend some guidelines.
I'll make a motion to accept into the minutes.
Second.
Motion by Packey, second by Holtmeyer. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none?
Approval of fireworks display.
So within your packet are your stuff. I think you've got, we've received all the paperwork. I don't see Tom in here, but I don't, if, got everything? Okay. So as we asked if you guys wanted to have a special meeting, obviously with the meetings, the way they fell and the date of the request for it, we didn't have a council meeting before July the 4th, and so they're requesting to go ahead and do this on the 3rd, correct? And then if not, if a makeup day would be on the 4th, and it'd be up at Knights of Columbus, so. As you guys, or most of you on the council are aware, we do not allow the shooting of fireworks within town, only by council order, so.
Any questions?
Everything's been approved by Tim on the fire department side? Okay.
Could I throw something in there? They can have a big event on the private property and get how many people they want there. You have to make a decision to have the fireworks or not by the city. If you have the fireworks, you are going to increase the size of that crowd exponentially. Just to let you know, but it's your choice to make.
It's known.
Need a motion?
Think so.
I make a motion to approve the fireworks permit.
Second.
Motion by Sondrup, second by Packey. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Anything else?
Nope. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Thank you.
Good job.